Stories of Atlantis, an Overview Part 2. By Alan Lee Whiteman, August 2025. This Part 2 is a continuation of Part 1 of the Stories of Atlantis overview. Recap: Source brought forth the idea that Earth would be a good place for humans to live, thrive, and grow spiritually. The alien Pleiadians decided to profit off of the idea by tasking some made-to-order Nefelim alien workers to go to Earth, stir up some trouble with the humans, harvest their warring emotional energies for shipment back to the Pleiadians. The Nefelim traveled to the Earth solar system, but upon arrival got stuck in a long elliptical orbit around the Sun. Still, they got busy building a living habitat for themselves on Earth, and in the process created a batch of superhuman workers who helped out in the construction efforts. The superhumans, the so-called Ka pronunciation, single syllable, were taught much of the same technology that the Nefelim received from the Pleiadians, but they did not have sufficient maturity and spiritual development to go with the technology gifts. Large portions of the Ka superhumans, the real inhabitants of Atlantis, began to experiment with specialty life creation, aka genetic engineering, got rather good at the practice, but became bored with minor life creations and turned their interest towards creating better humans and their understanding of what that meant. That activity got out of hand and eventually became the real reason for the destruction of Atlantis. The destruction delayed the Nefelim efforts to migrate their entire population to Earth, while also creating a nasty problem underground. Concurrent with the habitat construction efforts and experiments with genetic engineering, was the installation of the alien machines for harvesting of human emotional energies. Many such machines were deployed in clumps in the lateral tunnels that connected the living habitats and other tunnels branching off towards selected places below existing human cities or communities. Special DNA-level components were incorporated into the existing human populations that enabled and supported the harvesting activities. With the DNA changes in place, the machines could induce schisms in groups that demonstrated an independence of action. The schisms resulted in fighting and wars, and the machines then harvested the emotional energies of those doing the fighting. The harvested products were sent back to the Pleiadians as part of the uplift obligation the Nefelim had with them. Problem is, or was, with the fall of Atlantis, the maintenance and servicing of the harvesting machines was terminated, leaving lots of collected products sitting in shipping canisters which were not designed for long-term storage. After a while, sitting product began to spoil and turn into toxic chaos, and the canisters began to leak the contents into the environment. The toxic contents contributed to the schism and wars between developing human populations, making the relations between adjacent groups even worse. Also, the harvesting machines continued to operate with no auto turn-off feature. This has been going on for some 7,500 years, with the toxicity leaking problem taking place during the last 3,000 years. Stories of Atlantis Part 2 of the Overview. The Ka superhumans were the original inhabitants of Atlantis. They had the basic DNA set of the regular humans, but their DNA genetics had all of the life-preserving capabilities activated such that an individual could easily live a few thousand years absent issues of catastrophic death or murder. Ka men and women were set up as biological mates for themselves and could have children who would also be Ka in nature, health, and longevity. Ka men and women could, but generally did not, have children with regular humans, as such children were not Ka in nature or capability. Atlantis was not a large island, so the Ka population was self-limited in size despite the existence of several remote mining sites. They were aware of the issues around adverse inbreeding and sought to maintain a healthy genetic mix at all times. They knew that inbreeding is a path to genetic disaster and decline. So they worked at keeping a healthy genetic mix of people without also getting into issues of overpopulation growth. They saw themselves as speakers to the generic human population of Earth on behalf of the real alien Nefelim, hence Ka is a descriptive name having noun and verb context use forms of 1. The open mouth, and 2. The act of speaking through an open mouth. Ka is also a Sumerian word. The Ka Atlanteans did not organize themselves as a democracy. While they did have a ruling council, most of the society was organized along the lines of a near-military organization. Over time, some family lines began to emerge having more capability or focus on particular aspects of a managed society. Some 30 such family lines emerged, and the heads of each family line or profession became members of the ruling council. 3 members of the council functioned as a triumvirate where major decisions were made regarding rules, law, policies, and procedures. Over time 3 particular family lines became cemented in the triumvirate roles: engineers, defenders, and issuers. The issuers were the active Anunnaki of the Ka, the group most focused on society survival issues. They have a story of their own, one not pertinent to this simplified overview. The defenders were the police, political and military-like arm of the society. The family of the engineers. The engineers were responsible for the core function of the Nefelim migration and harvesting activities. To this end they had as a family line a special residence placed on the south end of the island where the chief engineer and his immediate family lived. Their residence was something like a mansion, a cathedral-like hall, and a gathering entertainment area for the upper levels of all Ka families during formal events. The place was up on the side of a hill having a magnificent view to the north over a plain. There was one particular chief engineer, a Lugalis Sidgmal, who was central to the story of Atlantis and the path to destruction. Lugalis had a variety of responsibilities and a large staff of other Ka who did physical structure construction and maintenance, think civil engineering, but his primary responsibility was establishment of the working transport mechanism, which had an Earth-side machine and a pier device up in synchronous orbit. The machines were of alien design and construction and largely did matter transcription and high-end data communications between themselves. Getting the transport machines set up and operating was his most demanding activity, and there was a time when that work almost brought him to the point of considering suicide to get out from under the responsibilities. But eventually the system was installed, activated, and placed into near continuous use by both Nefelim and the Ka themselves. With the transport system in place, the alien emotion harvesting machines were brought down from the Nefelim travel world and installed in selected locations underground in the vicinities of human population centers. For the purposes of this overview, a reader can think of present-day Egypt, Israel, and Saudi Arabia as the initial focus. Some of the machines were placed in the remote mining sites around Earth, but the Middle East was the primary focus. The Nefelim were still in the process of shuttling back and forth between Earth and their travel planet and almost getting ready to make their population migration move. This still left the Ka with time on their hands, and many of them joined the experimenting with specialty life creation. There is room to argue that since the Ka were largely human, that they themselves became subject to the schism-creating effects of the emotion harvesting machines. In time the Ka society itself began to split over 2 separate but related issues: genetic engineering and obedience to the Nefelim. The 2 schism lines were mostly parallel, creating 2 largely opposing groups, 1 and 4, and 2 much thinner overlapping groups, 2 and 3. Continue life creation and continue supporting the harvesting actions. 1. Loyalists, stop specialty life creation but continue supporting harvesting actions. 2. Tories, continue life creation but stop supporting the harvesting actions. 3. Liberals, stop specialty life creation and stop the emotion harvesting actions. 4. Rebels. Mixed in with this 2-part split were the interest of the Ka Anunnaki, who, like their Nefelim counterparts, were concerned with keeping the society together as a survivable unit. Lugalis Sidgmal started out as a loyalist but in the end became a rebel, though this was not his personal desire. Also mixed in with this situation were the interest of Spirit regarding how the overall human presence developed. Spirit saw the genetic engineering efforts becoming divergent. For the specialty life creation groups wanted to only produce perfect human children rather than those who might otherwise come into life with emotional, physical, or mental challenges. Spirit worked at incarnating like-minded souls into genetic engineering families as those who would subvert or cease the practice, but all such efforts failed. Eventually a decision was made in Spirit to pull the plug on Atlantis as the only viable mechanism for halting the practice. This was the ultimate reason for why Atlantis was destroyed, but an operative reason was created to bring about the fall, a reason related to what the Pleiadians were up to. This overview does not detail how the fall was initiated and executed, that is for the fuller story. While Atlantis was no longer present after the actual fall and destruction, there were still existing outposts of Ka Atlanteans who survived, being mostly of men and fewer women. With the reduced population, dispersion of Ka individuals, and gene pool reduction, the Ka began a death spiral process from which they never recovered. Some of the surviving outposts' residents retrieved several of the harvesting machines under their control and brought the machines up to ground level. Such groups sought to keep the harvesting practice going, but they lacked the technical expertise to operate them correctly. Other groups who were up in the synchronous orbit space station above Atlantis came down to Earthside and in time became gods of the Babylonian civilization, some with names like Ea, Enki, and Enlil. In further time others became the so-called Nefelim of biblical note, who sought to further their life's ends by producing children with women of the regular human population. Such children were, as stated earlier, not Ka nor capable of being Ka. Eventually all the Ka died out and the exact knowledge of what happened with Atlantis faded from legend into myth and storied speculation. While Atlantis was once a place of renown, came and went, the alien Nefelim did not disappear or even give up. The Nefelim started an Atlantis 2.0-like presence with the establishment of Sumer. They are still around and will be returning again. See my other writings in my sibling 2050 YouTube channel on what to expect with their next return. Something significant changed for them in 2010 which enables a Plan B approach for their migration plans. There is another storyline which goes by the name of Temples of the Rising Star, or just Temples for short. This is about another prophecy that I have regarding what might happen should the next return of the Nephilim be more cooperative in nature rather than an adverse annihilation of humanity. It is my hope that the next return will work out for the better and that Earth humanity will end up joining the larger galactic community. Cheers and stay tuned.